It started with a piece of paper, flimsy and unassuming, fluttering in the wind on my front porch, yet it carried the weight of a declaration of war. $300. I stared at the fine, the number printed in bold, aggressive font, and I could feel the heat rising up the back of my neck. A slow, simmering burn that had nothing to do with the summer sun and everything to do with the sheer, unadulterated audacity of it all. They were fining me for building a road on my own land. A 300-foot stretch of asphalt that I, Arthur Vance, a structural engineer with 30 years of experience designing bridges that spanned rushing rivers and highways that connected cities, had designed and paved with my own hands, fully permitted by the county, fully legal, and fully mine. But logic, as I would soon learn, had no place in the kingdom of Patricia Sterling. She stood on my porch that morning, the self-appointed queen of Oakhaven Estates, wearing a pastel suit that looked too stiff for the humidity, her lips pursed in a permanent expression of distaste, as if the very air around my farmhouse offended her delicate sensibilities. Patricia wasn't just the HOA president. She was a warlord in suburbia's clothing, a woman who wielded bylaws like a cudgel and treated her neighbors not as people, but as subjects to be ruled, fined, and molded into her vision of perfection. "Mr. Vance," she sneered, her voice possessing that grating, high-pitched quality that sets your teeth on edge, waving the citation in my face like a weapon. "You will comply with community standards, or we will escalate this. Pay the $300 now. Remove that hideous asphalt, or we will place a lien on your property so fast your head will spin." I stepped closer, invading her personal space just enough to make her flinch, and asked the question that would eventually bring her entire empire crumbling down. "And how? Exactly. Do you plan to get to your subdivision when I block the easement?" Her smug expression faltered, a crack in the porcelain mask. "What easement?" "The one," I said, my voice dangerously low, "that gives your entire 47-home subdivision legal access to the highway, the one running through my corner property, the one you just fined me for maintaining." She didn't know it yet, but she hadn't just tried to shake me down for $300. She had handed me the keys to her destruction, and I was about to drive a bulldozer through her life. To understand why this moment was so sweet, you have to understand where I came from. 6 months prior, I was just a man looking for silence, freshly divorced, tired of the city, tired of the noise, tired of designing infrastructure for ungrateful municipalities that cut corners and ignored physics. I found the 2.3-acre corner lot bordering Oakhaven Estates, a neglected farmhouse owned by an old-timer named Mr. Henderson who had passed away, leaving the place to rot. The moment I saw the survey map, the engineer in me saw the geometry of power. The lot was the pinch point, the jugular vein connecting the county highway to the sprawling, manicured lawns of the subdivision behind it. I bought it cash, a sanctuary, a place where the only noise was the wind in the oaks and the sound of my own tools. I spent months renovating the farmhouse, the smell of sawdust and fresh paint becoming my therapy, the physical labor of sanding floors and framing walls healing the cracks in my own life. It was paradise until the white SUV with the community pride bumper sticker started prowling my property line. Patricia Sterling didn't waste time. Her first visit was a courtesy warning about my mailbox being 2 inches too low, a mailbox that had stood there since the Carter administration. Next, it was a citation for unauthorized vegetation, which turned out to be wild sunflowers that had been growing there for decades. I watched her from my window, terrorizing the neighborhood, measuring grass height with a ruler, leaving citations on windshields, ruling through a campaign of petty bureaucratic terror. I saw neighbors like Maria Gonzalez, a single mother of 2, hurried into her house when Patricia's car rolled by, afraid of being cited for leaving a tricycle on the porch. I saw grown men, fathers and husbands, look at their shoes when she berated them in the street. Oakhaven Estates wasn't a community. It was a prison camp with manicured hedges, and Patricia was the warden. The road was supposed to be my final project. The dirt track leading to my house was a mud pit, an engineer's nightmare, so I did it right. I hired Old Man Miller, the best surveyor in the county. We marked the lines, I brought in the heavy machinery, laid the drainage, compacted the base, and poured a smooth, beautiful ribbon of blacktop that would last 50 years. It was precise, it was professional, and it was entirely within my property lines. The morning after the asphalt cured, Patricia struck. The $300 fine was followed 3 days later by a certified letter, thick and ominous, stuck to my door like a foreclosure notice. It was a masterpiece of intimidation, adding administrative fees, processing fees, and delivery fees, demanding nearly $600 or facing a lien that would destroy my credit. They threatened my standing in the community, my ability to refinance, everything they could think of to make me bow down. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter vibrating in my hand, and I realized that being reasonable was a luxury I could no longer afford. I went to the county records office the next morning, a place that smelled of dust and indifference, and I started digging. You see, bureaucrats are lazy and bullies are arrogant, and that combination is fatal if you know where to look. I pulled the original plat maps from 1988, back when Oak Haven Estates was just a glint in a developer's eye. I traced the property lines, I read the zoning amendments, and then, buried in a mislabeled folder in the basement archives, I found the smoking gun. My property, the corner lot, had been zoned for future commercial use in the original master plan, which meant it was never legally part of the residential HOA. Patricia had no jurisdiction over me, none, zero. But the real diamond, the detail that made my heart skip a beat, was the ingress-egress easement agreement signed 35 years ago. It granted the subdivision the right to cross that 50-foot strip of my land to reach the highway. But it came with a condition that had been ignored for decades. The agreement stated, in plain black and white legal text, that the HOA was required to pay the property owner an annual maintenance fee of $500, adjusted for inflation, starting in 1988. I sat in that silent room, the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, and I did the math. 35 years of unpaid fees, plus statutory interest compounded annually at 6%. While Patricia Sterling was threatening to ruin me over $300, she and her HOA were sitting on a debt to me that was approaching $10,000. I walked out of that records office into the blinding afternoon sun, and for the first time in months, I wasn't just an exhausted engineer or a divorced man starting over. I was a hunter who had just found the trail. The war didn't begin with a shout, but with a whisper of paper sliding across a desk. I sent my own certified letter to the HOA office, a simple, professionally drafted demand for the unpaid easement fees, giving them 30 days to pay or face legal action. Patricia Sterling's reaction was immediate and visceral, like poking a nest of hornets with a short stick. She didn't pay, of course. Instead, she escalated. Within 48 hours, I had a county zoning inspector at my door, a tired-looking man named Inspector Davis who clearly didn't want to be there, investigating a complaint about industrial activity in a residential zone. Patricia had reported my personal workshop as an illegal manufacturing plant. I showed him my permits, gave him a cup of coffee, and sent him on his way, but the message was clear. She was going to use every lever of government power she could find to crush me. Then came the whispers. My phone started ringing with cancellations from clients, confused people telling me they'd heard troubling things about my business ethics. Patricia was calling around, poisoning my reputation, suggesting I was litigious, unstable, difficult. It was a low blow, attacking a man's livelihood, but it was when she went after Maria Gonzalez that the cold fury truly set in. Maria came to my door one evening, her eyes red and swollen, holding a letter from Child Protective Services. Patricia, in her infinite malice, had made an anonymous tip claiming Maria's children were living in squalor and were being neglected. It was a lie, a disgusting, evil lie designed to terrify a single mother into submission because Maria had been friendly with me. "She's trying to take my babies, Arthur," Maria sobbed, sitting at my kitchen table, her hands trembling. "Because I waved at you? Because I didn't mow my lawn on Tuesday?" That was the moment the gloves came off. Attacking me was one thing. I'm a grown man. I can take a hit. But weaponizing the state against innocent children? That is an act of war. I spent the next week turning my property into a fortress of surveillance. I installed high-definition trail cameras with night vision and motion sensors along the easement and the property line. I needed evidence, and Patricia, in her arrogance, provided it in spades. Reviewing the footage was like watching a masterclass in entitlement. I caught the HOA's compliance officer, a nervous man named Gary, dumping bags of lawn clippings and construction debris on the back edge of my property, 15 feet past the line. In our state, Illegal dumping carries a fine of $500 per incident. I cataloged every single bag, every timestamp, every face. But I needed the kill shot. I went back to the archives, digging deeper this time, looking for the nuclear option, and I found it in a dusty city ordinance from 1992 regarding agricultural conversion subdivisions. The law stated that any subdivision built on former farmland, which Oakhaven Estates was, had to maintain their access roads to strict municipal codes or risk immediate revocation of their residential zoning status. If the road wasn't up to code, the city could legally declare the homes uninhabitable. I drove the main loop of Oakhaven that night, my truck bouncing over potholes deep enough to swallow a tire, noticing the faded signs, the crumbling curbs, the drainage that backed up every time it rained. Patricia had been so busy policing mailbox heights that she had let the actual infrastructure rot. The entire neighborhood was one inspection away from being condemned. Then, a knock on my door changed everything. It was Robert Thorne, the former HOA treasurer, a man with the weary posture of someone who has seen too much. He carried a briefcase and a look of grim determination. "I heard what she did to Maria," Robert said, placing a stack of documents on my table. "I can't sit on this anymore. Patricia isn't just a bully, Arthur. She's a thief." The documents were financial statements, real ones, not the sanitized versions sent to residents. They showed unauthorized withdrawals, payments to a law firm handling Patricia's divorce, consulting fees paid to her nephew. The HOA was bankrupt. They owed thousands to road maintenance crews, thousands to insurers. They were operating on fumes and fraud. Armed with this, I decided it was time to close the trap. I drafted a notice, breach of easement agreement. Since they hadn't paid the maintenance fees in 35 years, and since they were now actively trespassing and dumping on my land, I had the legal right to suspend access. I didn't just put up a chain. I installed a gate. It was a beautiful piece of engineering, heavy steel, solar-powered, with a magnetic card reader. I spent a weekend installing it, the sound of the welder hissing and sparking in the twilight, cementing the posts deep into the earth. It wasn't about blocking everyone. It was about control. I posted a sign, "Private property. Access restricted due to non-payment of easement fees. Residents contact HOA for access cards. Emergency services exempt." I activated the system at 4 a.m. on a Tuesday. By 7 a.m., the chaos was biblical. Cars were backed up down the driveway, engines idling, horns blaring. Residents were confused, angry, getting out of their cars to read the sign. And then, Patricia Sterling arrived. She came screaming up in her white SUV, screeching to a halt, storming toward the gate like a banshee. I walked out of my workshop, coffee in hand, leaning against the steel post. "Open this gate immediately," she shrieked, her face a mask of purple rage, grabbing the steel bars and shaking them. They didn't budge. "This is kidnapping. This is illegal. It's property management, Patricia," I said calmly, taking a sip of coffee. "You haven't paid your rent in 30 years. Pay the fees, distribute the cards, and everyone gets to go to work. It's up to you." But she didn't distribute the cards. In a move of pure spite, she refused to hand them out, telling residents that accepting a card was admitting defeat and that she would have the gate torn down by noon. She held her own neighbors hostage to her ego. That night, the cameras caught the final act of stupidity. At 2:47 a.m., the motion sensors triggered. I watched on my monitor as a figure in white pajamas approached the gate, wielding a pair of bolt cutters. It was Patricia. She was hacking away at the armored conduit protecting the power lines, sparks flying, cursing into the darkness, completely unaware that the infrared lens was capturing every pathetic criminal strike. She wasn't just a bad neighbor anymore. She was a felon, and I had it all in 4K resolution. The town hall meeting that followed was the stuff of legends, the kind of event that old-timers in the county would talk about for decades while sitting on porch swings. Commissioner Dan Reynolds called the emergency hearing due to the access crisis at Oakhaven Estates. The room was packed, standing room only, filled with angry residents, confused neighbors, and a local reporter named Jessica Cole who had sniffed out the corruption scandal. The air in the room was thick with tension, smelling of stale coffee and sweat. Patricia Sterling sat in the front row, arms crossed, looking defiant, surrounded by a dwindling group of sycophants. She looked like a queen who didn't realize her castle was already burning. Commissioner Reynolds banged the gavel. Mr. Vance, you have the floor. I stood up, hooked my laptop to the projector, and didn't say a word. I just pressed play. The screen lit up with the footage from 2:47 a.m. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. There she was, the president of the HOA, the arbiter of community standards, in fuzzy slippers and silk pajamas, looking like a deranged burglar, hacking at my gate. The nervous laughter started in the back and spread like wildfire. Patricia's face turned a color I've never seen on a human being, a mix of gray ash and violent red. That's faked, she screamed, jumping up, knocking her chair over. It's AI. He doctored it. It's time-stamped and GPS verified. Patricia, I said into the microphone, my voice steady. But that's just the appetizer. I clicked the next slide. The financial records provided by Robert Thorne. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the room. Your HOA fees haven't been going to road maintenance. They haven't been going to insurance. They've been going here. I scrolled through the list. Divorce attorney retainer, $5,000. Personal vehicle lease, $800 per month. Dining and entertainment, $12,000. The room went silent. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of a predator noticing prey. You could feel the shift, the moment the fear of Patricia evaporated and was replaced by pure, unadulterated rage. Then Maria Gonzalez stood up. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice rang out clear and true. Patricia, you called CPS on my children. You tried to destroy my family because I wouldn't let you bully me. You aren't a president. You're a monster. Patricia looked around, searching for an ally, for anyone to defend her, but the eyes staring back were cold. Robert Thorne walked to the front with a banker's box. I have the originals here, Commissioner. It's all true. Every cent. The sheriff, who had been standing quietly in the back, stepped forward. He didn't run. He just walked with the heavy, inevitable steps of justice. He placed a hand on Patricia's shoulder. Miss Sterling, I'm going to need you to come with us. She was let out in handcuffs, screaming about conspiracies and ungrateful peasants, her voice fading down the hallway until finally, the heavy doors clicked shut. The silence that followed was heavy, and then, Commissioner Reynolds looked at me. Mr. Vance, about the gate. The gate stays open, I said. As soon as the arrears are paid and a new board is elected. The aftermath was swift. Patricia Sterling pleaded guilty to embezzlement and felony destruction of property. She lost her house, her reputation, and her freedom. Maria Gonzalez was elected the new HOA president by a unanimous vote. The first check the new board wrote was to me, $7, $500 for back payment of the easement. But I didn't keep it. I couldn't. It felt like blood money, born from a conflict that had hurt too many good people. We established the Oakhaven Community Scholarship, a fund for local kids who demonstrated leadership and integrity. The first recipient was Maria's eldest daughter. 6 months later, I stood on my porch. The gate was there, but it was open. The road was smooth. I could hear kids playing in the park down the street, a sound that had been absent during Patricia's reign of terror. The fear was gone. The community had healed. I looked at the framed $300 citation I kept on my wall as a souvenir. It was a reminder that sometimes peace isn't given. It has to be built, paved, and defended. But as I watched the sun set over the road I built, I found myself wondering about the nature of what we had done. We destroyed a woman. Yes, she was a tyrant. Yes, she was corrupt. But we systematically dismantled her life, exposed her darkest secrets, and sent her to prison. Was it justice? Absolutely. But was there a part of me that enjoyed the destruction a little too much? A part of me that reveled in the power of holding the keys to the kingdom? When you fight a monster, you have to bring a weapon bigger than theirs, but you have to be careful not to become the thing you hate. I think we stayed on the right side of that line. I think. What do you think? Was the total destruction of Patricia Sterling a necessary act of liberation for the neighborhood? Or did I take the revenge too far by springing a trap I knew she couldn't escape? Does a bully deserve mercy when they're cornered, or do they deserve exactly what they gave to others? Let me know in the comments below.